special guest. As always, every single week, our Mr. NASCAR, our NASCAR expert, joins us from Pit Row, and this week it is Pit Row from Pocono. So shout out, Mr. NASCAR, how you doing this week?
Doing good, doing real good. We had another good week in New Hampshire and made Fumble Sports picking 4 of the last 5 winners. We almost had a clean sweep. We had 2 of our top 10s cash, and also our head-to-head selection, which makes it 7 of the last 10 for us. So heading to Pocono this week, this is going to be a little bit more tricky. There's not a lot of information to digest and try to select drivers this week, but we'll continue on and try to do our best like we always do.
Okay, in case anyone just missed that, I want to make sure that everyone opens their ears as wide as possible. I know a lot of you guys watching on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, and TikTok Live. You may not be big NASCAR fans. You may not bet on NASCAR, but pay attention. One more time, Mr. NASCAR, remind us, how have we done over the last 5 races? We have gotten 4 of the last 5 winners correct?
Yeah, so over the last 5 races, we picked a winner correct. We had Truex at Sonoma, Chastain at Nashville. We missed at Chicago when SVG was a surprise winner, and then we came back with Byron at Atlanta, and then this week we had Truex Jr. at New Hampshire, who was an absolute dominant car. He won both stages. He led something like 254 of the 301 laps. An absolute dominant performance from Truex. So, yeah, we hit 4 of the last 5. We almost had a clean sweep where we hit the winner, all 3 top 10s, and the head-to-head. We missed. Kyle Busch had a really, really rough week in New Hampshire, very unlike him. So he hurt us in the top 10 category, but we still cashed a 2. And then our head-to-head selection, we had Suarez over Almirola. Almirola crashed out early. That was an easy winner there, and that makes it 7 of the last 10 of our head-to-head selection. So it's for people that don't watch racing or any type of racing, it's not tooting our own horns here at Fumble Sports, but I mean picking winners is really, really hard.
Really hard for everybody watching at home. This is not like taking Shohei Ohtani to hit a home run. This is like taking the number 7 hitter in a lineup to hit a home run when it comes to odds. This is plus 800, plus 900, plus 1,000 when it comes to winners. So if you guys are not into NASCAR betting, get into it and pay attention because our NASCAR expert knows his shit. So make sure you're paying attention because he does the work. He is a true... When I say NASCAR expert, I am not blowing smoke up his tailpipe. This dude knows what he's talking about, and that's why he joins us every week. Again, make sure you guys are paying attention because he's going to give you some winners. He's going to give you some good picks over the course of our conversation. But before we talk about winners specifically, Mr. NASCAR, let's just take one giant step back. Where are we in the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, and what are the current standings? Who's stood out as kind of the dominant drivers so far this year?
Well, as far as dominant drivers so far this year, you have Truex and Byron, I think, that they're in their own class right now. Larson kind of tailed off a little bit. He's been running well. But as far as, like, a total camp, Toyota, JGR has really come forward. But Truex and Byron really are the leaders in the clubhouse right now, heading into what will be 6 races left for drivers for a chance to make the playoffs. And it's going to be crunch time. Right now you have Michael McDowell, Daniel Suarez, AJ Allmendinger, Bubba Wallace. These guys are all trending around that 16th cut line to make the playoffs in 6 races. So, it's go time. And, I'll say this as a broad term. The easy way to make the playoffs is to win, right? And winning in the cup level is extremely, extremely difficult for any driver. So it's easy to say, yep, you win and you're in the playoffs. Harvick, Keselowski, these are past champions. These are some of the best drivers the sport's ever seen have yet to win a race this year. They're sitting inside the cut line right now pretty comfortably with over 100 points to each of them. But like I mentioned, the Buschers, Wallace, McDowell, Suarez, Allmendinger, this is going to be a dogfight to the finish. I don't think we're going to have another 6 winners to push any of these guys out. So I think it's going to come down to a point battle for that 14th to 15th, 16th position to make the playoffs. So it's go time right now for these drivers, and the pressure is going to start to come aboard really quickly for a lot of these teams.
What should we know about Pocono Raceway, also known as the Tricky Triangle?
Yeah, so Pocono is the most unique track design that the Cup Series races at. Now, I will put a disclaimer here. If you just recently started watching racing and you turned the Chicago Street Race on, you turned Atlanta on, and you turned Loudon on last week, New Hampshire, which was a really, really good race, don't let Pocono discourage you if you turn this on for the first time. Pocono is a 2.5-mile triangle. It sounds great, but it's a little too big. And what happens is the most exciting thing that'll happen at Pocono is the restarts and the starts. Guys will go 5-6 wide into turn one. They'll funnel it back down. But this race typically ends up being like a few mileage race, a track position race. It's not one of the exciting races you're going to watch all year. Now, the theory is great. It is a triangle, and each corner, there's 3 turns. Each turn was designed after another racetrack. So turn 1, Trenton, New Jersey Speedway, which is no longer there anymore. I think there's a UPS shipping facility of where it used to stand. That's what turn 1 is at Pocono, designed after with 14 degrees of banking. Turn 2 is modeled after the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The tunnel turn with 8 degrees of banking. And then probably the most critical turn that drivers and teams are going to have to navigate will be turn 3. It's modeled after the Milwaukee Mile with 6 degrees of banking. But the reason turn 3 is so important is because Pocono has the longest straightaway of any track that NASCAR runs at. So getting through turn 3 and getting off of turn 3 to maximize that speed down the front stretch is everything here. So it's not a super speedway like we talk about Daytona and Talladega. You're not going to see pack racing, but it does have the longest straightaway on the Cup Series circuit. So like I said, the starts and restarts will be pretty crazy, but after that, this will settle into more of a fuel mileage, track position type race, guys trying to get their cars to handle. So like I said, if you turn this on for your first NASCAR race and it's a little bit of a snoozer, don't be discouraged because they only go here once a year now. They used to go twice. So it has its own little niche, and people like to go up there in the Pocono Mountains, and it's a beautiful area, but the racing there can sometimes, leave you left to be desired.
I'm glad you really broke down what the track is like, because I worked at Fox Sports, like I've mentioned before, for a few years, and they obviously have NASCAR coverage, and I never got into it. It was always the sport that, of all the sports that they covered, it was the one that I was least interested in, and maybe in part it's because the personalities were highlighted in terms of the drivers, but the racetracks, the differences and the unique qualities of each racetrack are not well promoted. And it's kind of cool for me to hear that each turn of that triangle up in Pocono presents its own challenge. It literally would be like if I took a tennis court and I cut it up into quadrants and I said, okay, one quadrant is clay, one's grass, one's hard court. It's so cool to think that the challenge of the different turn, that adds its own different environment, its own different challenge. And again, that straightaway, that's going to produce some speed, but it also means there's going to be some nip and tuck around that turn. I'm interested in who comes out clean. I understand that probably does lead to a lot of stop and start kind of racing.
Yeah, it does. And, when we talk about racing, you'll never, ever have, even Truex dominated last week in New Hampshire. He had some complaints on his car, and they could have made it better on the longer run or the shorter run. And that's exactly what will happen at Pocono this weekend. You may, these crew chiefs are going to set up for turn 3, like we talked about. It's very critical. And then they might suffer in turn 2 because of what they need to do to set up the car for turn 3. So you're never going to have a perfect race car through all 3 of these corners, and you have to give some to get some here. So it's kind of like a balancing act. Like, hey, we need to be good in turn 3, but to do that, we're going to give up a little bit here of, some front grip in turn 1. So it's a balancing act for crew chiefs, and this is really a tough place to get a hold of. So you just do the best you can, and you try to keep your track position and your fuel mileage dialed in all day.
Okay, give me a couple of names we think are going to finish in the top 10.
So a couple guys in the top 10 to take a look at. We talk about him a lot as Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is just pretty much good everywhere. There's a few tracks that struggles at, but he's not a Pocono winner. But at 15 starts, he has 9 top 10s. So that's a pretty good stat to look at. And then the last 3, he's finished 2nd and 5th. So that's a good one to take a look at for a top 10. It's probably going to be a lot of chalk on him. He doesn't get the best odds because he is so talented and he runs in the top 10 most everywhere we go. Another guy that's been coming on here as of lately has been Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney had a really good car in New Hampshire. They had a pit stop where they thought they were going to take 2 tires, or no one told them they were taking 2 tires. They dropped the jack, he took off, ran over some pit equipment, and put him in the back of the pack when he was actually running 2nd at the time. So this 12 team has really been coming on. He got his first Cup win at Pocono, and then the last 3 races, he has 2 top 10s with an average finish of 13.1. So with the way Blaney and the momentum is coming on for him, I could definitely see him in the top 10 this weekend.
Give me a driver or two that you expect to have a disappointing race at Pocono.
Man, this is yeah, we've talked about him before, and it's the NASCAR's most popular driver, Chase Elliott. I don't know what is going on with the 9 team right now. He is just, he missed 6 races with his broken leg from snowboarding. He missed one for being suspended for intentionally wrecking someone. And this is a huge story because when Chase Elliott, when he was out those 6 races, NASCAR's TV ratings actually dropped. That's what influence he has over, viewership. He has such a huge following and a fan base. So for him to not make the playoffs, which he's not in right now, it's really concerning. And everywhere we go to Pocono this weekend. He won here last year. Now, he won here last year by technically finishing 3rd. Denny Hamlin crossed the start finish line first with his teammate Kyle Busch behind him, and they got disqualified for having unimproved tape on the nose. So Chase Elliott actually won this race last year by finishing 3rd, and he is good here. And there's a lot of these tracks he's good, but man, I just can't get on board with this 9 car right now. They're missing something. They were not good at New Hampshire last week, albeit all the Hendrick cars, Lillard and Larson, really weren't that great. But the changes that they're making to the car don't seem to be getting better. He's not running up front. I mean, in 13 races this season, he's only led 38 laps. And leading laps, to me, is a big indicator of who could be a winner, coming up soon in any week. And Chase Elliott right now, they're just missing something there. And it sounds crazy to say fade Chase Elliott, especially when he finished 3rd and ultimately won the race last year. But I need to see more out of this 9 team before I can start putting him back in the rotation of guys to win, because there's just something off right now with Alan Gustafson, his crew chief, and Chase. There's just something missing there with that dynamic. But the NASCAR's most popular driver missing the playoffs right now is a huge storyline in the Cup Series.
Finally, give me 2 or 3 names that we could see crossing the finish line first.
Well, I think 2 guys you could see, let's just talk about Martin Truex. It's very, very hard to win a Cup Series like we talked about. It's even harder to win back-to-back races. But Martin Truex has been so good here as of late. He's a 2-time winner of Pocono. So I could certainly see him running in the top 5 with a chance to win. And kind of a guy, a sneaky pick along the Toyota camp is Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick has 2 top 10s in the last 2 races there, and he finished 2nd albeit with his qualifications. He finished 2nd there last year, and this is a track where it really suits his style. These flat corners at Pocono almost kind of resemble somewhat what you might see as a road course a little bit. And Tyler Reddick, we know how good he is at road courses. So he's been coming on. His speed that he has shown this year has been awesome, but he has just had pit road woes, or he's had a bad strategy. He's had things out of his realm of what he can do that take him on good finishes. Kind of a guy sneaky this week that could be hanging around there at the end to win this thing.
Do you think we could get good odds on him or no?
Yeah, I think so. I think the last time I checked, he was sitting around plus 14.
Keep in mind, again, everybody, our NASCAR expert has gotten the last 4 out of the last 5 winners correct and has cashed on a number of the top 10. And again, those come in at really good odds, so definitely something you want to consider. One last thing for our NASCAR expert before he goes back to pit row and helps out the folks there at Pocono. My one last question is there a head-to-head matchup that you've got your eye on? You've been hot on those as well. Those don't have the plus money odds that obviously a winner or a top 10 finish would have. Those usually come in at like minus 140 to minus 165. But is there a head-to-head you've got your eye on? And if you do, which driver do you like?
So there's a couple things to look at here. The head-to-head matchups this week feature a lot of Joe Gibbs Racing drivers, like we talked about. That JGR camp has been really strong versus a lot of Hendrick drivers. So you're not really getting a lot of value with that right there. But there was one head-to-head that kind of piqued my interest, and it was interesting because Joey Logano is a 2-time champion, and you don't see him as an underdog very much in these head-to-head challenges. And when you can get a guy like Joey Logano at plus money, I think you got to kind of take a look at it. And there's a couple head-to-heads that I would stay away from this week, but this is one I would take a look at. They have him squaring off against Ross Chastain, and Ross Chastain is a heavy favorite at minus 145. And Chastain has not run well at Pocono. His best finish is 24th. He did run well last year until he crashed. But if you can give me a 2-time Cup champion, going to a place, I know Ford's been down a little bit this year. We talked about the aero deficiencies they had in some of these racetracks. But if you can give me Joey Logano plus money in the head-to-head against anybody, I think that's something you need to take a look at.
So once again, for those, just to recap what Mr. NASCAR was talking about, thinks Tyler Reddick at good plus money could be a good person to maybe cross the finish line. One of a couple people he's got his eye on, Kevin Harvick and Ryan Blaney, are a couple that he has his eye on when it comes to crossing within the top 10. He will give out all of his picks in an article that we will drop later this evening. So if you guys want to check out all of our picks from our NASCAR expert, go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, and you can find all of his picks. One last thing before we let you go. Mr. NASCAR, I love how you finish every interview you do with the same kind of call to action for our Butt Fumble sports fans. So I always want to make sure I give you that opportunity to just encourage people to get involved with the racing community.
Yeah, for sure. We said before, we'll say it all the time, is support your local short tracks. It's the ultimate small business owner. Keeping these short tracks alive across the country is a really hard thing to do, and they rely on people attending the races and sponsorship and all that that comes along. But this is a good way for you to go learn about racing, learn the cadence of the weekend, how practice leads into qualifying on the race. Why does a race director make a certain call? What the colors of the flags mean? Like, this is, you go to a local short track on a Saturday night, you can pick up a lot and learn a lot. It's a great family atmosphere. It's cheap. You can go for, it's a lot cheaper than taking the kids to a Major League Baseball game, so to speak. So it's a good family atmosphere. You can learn a lot. You support local short tracks. And I can guarantee, no matter where you live in this country, there's one within 30-minute drive of your house, whether it's a dirt track or an asphalt track or anything like that. So, support those guys. It means a lot to them to keep that going. And also, like we mentioned before, these are where these cup drivers, this is where they come from. This is where they cut their teeth. They start racing at a young age. And next thing you know, Ty Gibbs was running all over the Southeast, Joe Gibbs' grandson, running at some of these places that I won't even mention the names because you've never heard of them, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. But these people that went to the racetrack saw Ty Gibbs when he was 10, 11, 12 years old running late models. And now he's in the 54 car replacing Kyle Busch this year at Joe Gibbs Racing. So you never know who you're going to see and what talent comes up through the ranks, but the grassroots level of where these drivers come from.
Thank you so much, Mr. NASCAR. Mr. NASCAR joins us every single week to get all of the analysis and picks that we need to cash in on the week's action. So we want to thank Mr. NASCAR for all of the information that he just gave us.